Good morning, my dear students. Today we shall discuss on a new topic on banking, that is origin and development of banking in India. And this is the new topic for those students who have not offered finance in HS level. And for those who have offered, for them it would be something নতুনকৈ তেওঁলোকে অলপ বহলভাৱে শিকিব পাৰে। ভাৰতত কেতিয়াৰ পৰা বেংক আৰম্ভ হৈছিলে আৰু ইয়াৰ উন্নয়নটো কেনেকুৱা এই সম্পৰ্কে আমি আলোচনা কৰিম। ভাৰতত বেংক অতি পুৰণি আৰু বেংকৰ ব্যৱসায় অতি পুৰণি বুলি আমি বিভিন্ন নথিপত্ৰত পাওঁ। We have different evidences in different holy books, মনুস্মৃতি, কৌটিলৰ অৰ্থশাস্ত্ৰ, এই ধৰণৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কিতাপত আমি বেংকৰ লেনদেনৰ সম্পৰ্কে আমি দেখা পাওঁ। কিন্তু আমি সিমানলৈকে নগৈ ভাৰতত ইষ্ট ইণ্ডিয়া কোম্পানীক যেতিয়া প্ৰৱেশ কৰিছিলে সিন্স 1600 AD, আমি তাৰ পিছৰ পৰাহে বেংকৰ ডেভেলপমেণ্টটো ভাৰতত কেনেকুৱা হৈছে সেইটো মই ক্ৰমাগতভাৱে আলোচনা কৰিবলৈ প্ৰয়াস কৰিম। East India Company came to our country in 1600 AD, and from this period we shall discuss the development of banking in our country. When the East India Company came to our country, they faced particularly the financial difficulty in financial transaction. অৰ্থাৎ তেওঁলোকে যেতিয়া ভাৰতত ব্যৱসায়ৰ কাৰণে আহিছিলে তেতিয়া তেওঁলোকে প্ৰথম অসুবিধা পাইছিলে বিত্তীয় লেনদেন। ভাৰতৰ বেংক ব্যৱস্থা ইংলেণ্ডৰ দৰে উন্নত নাছিলে, গতিকে তেওঁলোকে ভাবিলে যে নিজাকৈ বেংক ব্যৱস্থা তেওঁলোকে কৰি ল'ব, যাতে তেওঁলোকৰ বেংকৰ জৰিয়তে তেওঁলোকৰ ব্যৱসায়ৰ উন্নতি বা তেওঁলোকৰ ব্যৱসায় সুকলমে কৰিব পাৰে। ডেট ৱাজ দ্য ৰিজন দে ৱান্টেড টু ষ্টাৰ্ট দ্য বেংকিং বিজনেছ ইন আৱাৰ কাণ্ট্ৰি। আৰু সেইকাৰণে তেওঁলোকে বেংক ব্যৱসায়ৰ প্ৰথম হাতনি মেলিছিলে আৰু প্ৰথমতে তেওঁলোকে তেওঁলোকৰ উদ্যোগত 1760 চনত 1770 the Bank of Hindustan was established, and it was considered as the first modern commercial bank. Of course, this bank was started in the line of British banking system, and that was the first bank in our country which was considered as a modern commercial bank in our country. And then they divided the Indian economy into three regions, and eastern part Calcutta, western part Madras, and southern part Bombay. And that's why they wanted to start three major commercial banks according to their own principles. And accordingly, after the development of Bank of Hindustan in 1770, they wanted to start the bank in our country, particularly in the eastern India, and the first bank they started in 1806, that is Bank of Calcutta. And this bank particularly financed to the British businessmen, and this bank was not originally, that is in the line of Indian principles, and entirely this bank is based on the British principles. অৰ্থাৎ কলিকতাত তেওঁলোকে প্ৰথম ইষ্ট ইণ্ডিয়া কোম্পানীয়ে তেওঁলোকৰ আদৰ্শৰে 1806 চনত বেংক অফ কেলকাতা নামেৰে এটা নতুন বেংক স্থাপন কৰিছিলে, আৰু এই বেংকটোৱে তেওঁলোকৰ ব্ৰিটিছ ব্যৱসায়ীসকলক মুখ্যতঃ সহায় কৰিছিল। তাৰপিছত এই বেংকটোৱে ব্ৰিটিছ সংসদৰ চাৰ্টাৰৰ অনুমতি পোৱা নাছিল, আৰু সেইকাৰণে তেওঁলোকে 3 বছৰ পিছত 1809 চনত বেংক অফ বেংগল নামেৰে এটা নতুন বেংক স্থাপন কৰিছে। প্ৰকৃততে বেংক অফ কেলকাতাক হস্তান্তৰ কৰিছে, অৰ্থাৎ নতুন নাম দি বেংক অফ বেংগল কৰিছে, আৰু বেংক অফ বেংগলটোৱে হ'ল প্ৰথম প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক, ভাৰতত প্ৰথম প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক। প্ৰেচিডেন্সি চাৰ্টাৰৰ অধীনত ইয়াক অনুমোদন দিয়া হৈছে, আৰু সেইকাৰণে প্ৰথম প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক হিচাপে বেংক অফ বেংগলক জনা যায়। আৰু বেংক অফ বেংগলটো 1809 চনত প্ৰকৃততে আৰম্ভ হোৱা নাছিলে, 1806 1806 চনত আৰম্ভ হৈছিলে, কিন্তু এই বেংকটো নামাকৰণ কৰি 1809 চনত ইয়াক বেংক অফ বেংগল হিচাপে ইয়াক প্ৰথম প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক হিচাপে স্বীকৃতি পাইছে। ব্ৰিটিছ চাৰ্টাৰত ই অনুমোদন পাইছে। আৰু ঠিক তেনেকৈ বেংক অফ বম্বে ভাৰতৰ দক্ষিণ অঞ্চলত বেংক অফ বম্বে দ্বিতীয়টো প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক, ছেকেণ্ড প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক, বেংক অফ বম্বে 1840 চনত ইয়াক আৰম্ভ কৰিছিলে। আৰু মাদ্ৰাজ অঞ্চলত, সেই সময়ত মাদ্ৰাজ প্ৰভিন্স বুলি কৈছিলে, মাদ্ৰাজ প্ৰভিন্সত 1843 চনত তৃতীয়টো প্ৰেচিডেন্সি বেংক আৰম্ভ কৰিছিল। These three presidency bank were the principal commercial bank at that time, and all this bank that is undertaken the different government business at that time, and these three presidency bank neglected the Indian business. That was the most important defects of banking. These three presidency bank, and Indian people were rejected. Indian people were not favored regarding the business loan and other things, and that's why Indian people, Indian philanthropists also started the banking business in their Indian principle. Lala Rajpat Rai were the prominent one, and accordingly they started the Punjab National Bank. That was the most important bank. That was the first bank started by Indian people in the Indian principles. But one thing is that prior to that establishment of Bank of Bombay, the Bank of Bombay, when it was established in the 1840, the Bank of Bengal, that is granted the note issue power in 1921. 1921, the Bank of Bengal, that is first presidency bank, got the note issue power, but note issue power granted to other two presidency bank after the establishment of 1840 and 1843. But simultaneously, note issue power, it was rejected. In 1862, Indian Paper Currency Act was passed, and this act withdrew the power of note issue from the three presidency bank, Bank of Bengal, Bank of Bombay, and Bank of Madras. But these three banks became very weak at the time of First World War. When the First World War started in 1913, most of the banks existing in our country, they became failed or they faced the financial crisis, and accordingly the three presidency bank also faced the acute financial crisis, and that's why then government of India decided to have a strong bank after amalgamation of these three. That means they wanted to amalgamate three presidency banks. After the First World War, these three presidency banks amalgamated into one to have a strong bank, and accordingly in 1920 one act was passed. This act was known as Imperial Bank of India Act 1920, and according to the provisions of this Imperial Bank of India Act, the three presidency bank amalgamated into one, and the new name was given, that is the Imperial Bank of India. And this bank became so strong, Imperial Bank of India became so strong, and people considered it to be a future central bank of our country. Then government of India rejected, and Khirendra Commission was constituted, and Khirendra Commission was the financial commission, and this commission rejected the conversion of Imperial Bank into a central bank of our country, and they considered, they recommended that India should have a separate central bank, and another committee was constituted, and this is known as Central Banking Inquiry Committee 1929-30. And Central Banking Inquiry Committee also rejected the conversion of Imperial Bank into Central Bank, and accordingly, Government of India decided to have a separate central bank, and for this reason, in 1934, accordingly, the Government of India passed the RBI Act 1934 to create the separate central bank, and according to the provisions of the RBI Act 1934, in 1935, RBI was established as a private sector shareholders bank. At that time, the central bank of our country, that is RBI, was not the public sector bank. It was not the central bank. It was the private sector shareholders bank. And this bank, just after the independence in 1948, the RBI became the public sector bank. That means the RBI was originally a private sector bank, and this bank was nationalized just after independence in 1948, and RBI Act was amended according to these provisions. The RBI became the nationalized bank, and it was the full-fledged central bank of our country. Up to this part, all the Indian banking systems and the banking institutions were governed by the British banking law. Since the British banking law governed the Indian banking system, Indian banking institutions, that's why Indian people faced different financial crises, or they were not accustomed to the Indian economic situation. That is why the independent government wanted to have a separate banking law for our country in 1949. That's why one separate banking law was passed, and this banking law was known as Banking Companies Act 1949. The Banking Companies Act 1949 was the milestone in the Indian banking law, banking legislations. That was the first Indian banking law, and this law governs the starting of bank, how to manage the bank, how to liquidate the bank. All are governed in 1949. Of course, this bank excludes the operation of commerce cooperative bank in our country. The cooperative banking sector, that was not covered, and cooperative banking sector, that was covered by the 1804 Register of Indian Companies Act. That was the exclusion of Banking Companies Act 1949. Of course, the cooperative bank also included by one amendment of Banking Companies Act 1949 in 1965. In 1965, one great development took place regarding the Banking Companies Act, and this act includes the cooperative banking activities, and the name of Banking Companies Act, Banking Regulation Act 1949, in place of Banking Companies Act. And since 1965 onwards, the India governed all banking activities located in our country, including foreign bank. How to manage the banking activities, how to start the banking activities, how to wind up, that is the liquidate the banking activities, all are governed by the Banking Regulation Act 1949. Of course, some provisions of RBI Act that would be applied for the entire activities of banking in our country. As for example, say licensing to start a bank, one license must be given from the RBI, and that is the part. That part is governed, that part is controlled, that part is regulated by the RBI. But the other part, how to manage, how to start, how to liquidate, all are covered by Banking Regulation Act 1949. After 1949, one major development took place in our country after the passing of Banking Companies Act in 1951, that is setting up of All India Rural Credit Survey. The first credit survey established particularly the independent government, and Government of India, when it was established, it was commissioned, not established, the commission, All India Rural Credit Survey 1951. This Rural Credit Survey recommended that India should establish the rural bank under the government initiative. Then the India people will be developed, the rural people will be developed, and agricultural sector, since the earlier banks rejected regarding finance, and that's why in 1951 recommendations given by All India Rural Credit Survey that was accepted by the Government of India, and government wanted to start a rural bank under its own initiative, and for this reason, accordingly, the already established big commercial bank, Imperial Bank of India, the Imperial Bank of India was nationalized in 1955, and the new bank started. That is the big bank, that is the State Bank of India in 1955. This is the most important development in our country, and nowadays major banking activities undertaken by State Bank of India, and that is the most important development in commercial banking, particularly in the public sector banking in our country, and State Bank of India opened different rural branches in our country as per the recommendation of the All India Rural Credit Survey. Students, today we shall conclude this part, and after this, the second part will be discussed, post-banking development, post-independent banking development in our country. Thank you.